All right. Well, hello everybody. Welcome to our studio.
Our home studio.
Our home studio, one of them. I'm sure you've seen the videos I've done and the reels I've done from my office. Now we're actually coming from your office.
My office, yeah.
Which is really kind of convenient given that you have our own name on the wall.
I do. I love that.
So,
I have it.
Here right off the start, we've had a discussion of what should we call these conversations.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've done in the past Mental Health Monday.
Yeah.
We did our COVID discussions.
Live at 5.
Live at 5. And, you know, we came to you and we told you on Instagram earlier this year that we wanted to really be intentional about sharing what God has put on our heart, you know, sharing our experiences, what we've gone through, what we're going through.
Mm-hmm.
And so we wanted to come in and do this and have these discussions because so many of our discussion time just on our own, we're like, we should have recorded that.
Yep.
And so that's what this is.
Yep.
But we want to ask you, we're not, I guess, creative enough to come up with ideas. What should we call this?
Yeah.
Abby just brought up 5 minutes before, real talk. But she, as you did say, that's already been taken.
Somebody else has that. Burger chat.
You know, Burger Shack.
Cheesy chat. Cheesy, no, I don't know.
That's
cheesy burger chat.
Cheesy burger. Yes, we've already gotten to the cheesiness right there. But we wanted to open it up to you and let you give us some of your creative ideas and see what you can come up with, because we've sat here and haven't been able to come up with anything.
Yeah.
So we're going to leave that to you. And for the rest of our time here right now, we kind of want to give you an insight into some of our discussions. Mm-hmm. You know, this year has already been pretty eventful for us. Yeah. We've had some pretty big breakthroughs in our spiritual life. Yep. On the physical level, we haven't really seen. We've seen, but I don't know if people on the outside would say that they've seen major physical breakthrough in our lives. Right. To the outsider, it may not look like we've overcome a lot, or we've come a long way, but I know we both agree that we've seen some big changes in each other in the first 2 months of this year. Mm-hmm. And so we've had these discussions and thought that maybe we'd have one here today. Yeah. And we've been blessed to connect with a church at the beginning of this year, and actually it was the end of last year, that has been I guess a godsend for us. I've called it an oasis because I feel like we've been walking in the desert for a long time, and this has been a reviving oasis thus far. Thus far. I mean, I think there's been things in my personal life and your personal life that have been called out. Mm-hmm. Obviously, with where we're at, there is history for me that there were unresolved things from my past that I didn't even know needed to be dealt with. Right. That God has dealt with and kind of brought healing to areas that I didn't even know needed healing. Mm-hmm. Because of the church that we're at. Because of the church where we're at. Yeah. I don't think it could have happened at any other church. Yeah, I would agree with that. And to have the relationships that we've built and the influences that have been able to influence us, I think we've seen some major change. Mm-hmm. And so I know we're both thankful for where God has us right now. Mm-hmm. Who knows where he's going to have us in the future. Mm-hmm. But he's definitely shown himself strong and mighty this year. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. And one of the things with, you know, the church that we are currently at is that we started this year, as many churches do, with 21 days of prayer and fasting. Mm-hmm. And we followed that up with a week of revival meetings, which, if you've watched some of my other videos, I've touched on some of these revival meetings and some of the things that have come out of there. And I wanted to take today to kind of talk about revival, because we have ourselves experienced personal revival while at the same time witnessing corporate revival. We've seen, other members of the congregation, other leaders find breakthrough, find new direction, find healing. I mean, we saw some healings that occurred and will continue to occur. But I really feel like we have missed the mark with revival in the past. I mean,
We, meaning the church,
meaning
or
the
body?
church.
Okay.
Having grown up in an Assemblies of God background, having seen those
Moves of God.
seeing, in the youth group, in Sunday services, Sunday afternoon, evening services,
Camp services.
seeing these moves of God happen, and then 6 weeks later, it's like nothing happened.
Right.
And a lot of people have seen that, and it's turned a lot of people off to these revival meetings. I think in one of my previous videos, I talked about people saying Pentecostals are nothing but emotionals.
Right.
Right? That there's really no power to God. There's no power of the Holy Spirit, and that all of this is just theatrics, which is unfortunate. I mean, you've been in these meetings.
Yeah.
You've been a part of these things. You've seen God move. You felt God move.
Oh, yeah.
That you can't really deny what he has done and what he is doing. So where is the disconnect? And this is a conversation we've had, of where's the disconnect between that revival meeting and 6 weeks later?
Right.
Was that a real authentic move of the Spirit, or was it manufactured? Because that's been, that has been a comment that has readily been heard over our lifetime. And I think has probably led to a desensitization to the Spirit in a lot of cases. That from our personal experience seems to be that the Spirit is reawakening.
Right. Absolutely.
And I know we've discussed this. Is there anything you want to add? I know I've done a lot of talking here in the first 8 minutes of our video. Is there anything you wanted?
I think there's validity, or there's maybe not validity, but I think that it's worth noting that there has been, I feel like, over the last decade, but maybe even shorter, a lot of push for, revival meetings. And, you and I have gone to some, right around the time COVID hit, and, it's hard to find places that were actually open that you could go to. And there are, the churches that we've gone to where they'll have, Wednesday night revival meeting, and you go, and it's really just a name to call a service. And then I think, so I would say that maybe there's been an oversaturation of that word, revival meeting, that people have this kind of knee-jerk reaction to not take it seriously because of how things have gone over the last several years. It's it's just another one of those things where you're going to go and you're going to be there for a really long time and, go home, and nothing's really going to come from it. Because that's kind of how it's been, at least in this area. The service things that we've gone to, have kind of been like that. And this 21 days of fasting and the services that were held, and then the 4 days of revival services, we went every single one of them. There was a noticeable like presence that was there that I would say this actually warrants the title revival service, right? So I do think that in this area, in the Pacific Northwest, I think it's happening really far and wide. But where we're at, I feel that there is something that has shifted through the first quarter of this year spiritually, that it's marked and it's different.
I would agree that there has been a shift. I mean, even I think as we speak right now, there is a massive revival meeting going on in Seattle. Actually,
that's right.
Russell Johnson, who came and spoke at one of our meetings, has Jonathan Shuttlesworth speaking at his church this week. And if it's not going on tonight, it has been the previous few nights. So we are in an area that is seeing revival, or at least has pastors and church leaders who are exploring and pursuing revival. And I love that.
Yeah.
I love that the pursuit is there, not to really, Russell Johnson's church is the pursuit. But I love that there are churches and leaders that are pursuing revival. But that's nothing new.
No.
We've had growing up in what people say is the most unchurched, darkest region of our country. We have been surrounded, if we think back, with revival meetings. There's been revival meetings, and this might be the case being in every other part of the country as well, but it just seems like there's always some major revival meeting going on in this area. And there's a need for it because, yes, we are we are an unchurched region.
Right.
Now, when people say that we're a spiritually dead region, I would actually disagree with that.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this before, that I believe we are actually one of the more spiritually aware regions. The problem is we have so much of the occult going on. We have the Church of Satan is in Seattle. We have a lot of New Age and Wicca and all these other spiritualities that, while we might be in a post-Christian time, in a very post-Christian region, we are actually in a very spiritually aware and spiritually active area, making the move of the Holy Spirit and the revival of the Holy Spirit so much more important and powerful. Which brings me to my first point, that we need to get past the emotions of our revival meeting, because we've been in these meetings. There's a lot of emotion that goes on there. And emotions are not bad. Emotions are part of God's design for mankind. It really, our emotions are what alert us to what's going on beneath the surface.
Right.
They alert us to whether we need to change or continue something. In our seminar, we talk about them as the warning lights on the dash of a car. So emotions in a revival meeting are normal. When you experience breakthrough, when you experience an amazing gift, you're going to be emotional. You're going to be overwhelmed. You give a little kid the gift that they've always wanted, and they're going to jump for joy. They're going to be excited.
Or
cry. So emotions are part of it. But emotions can't be all of it.
Right.
And the problem that we have faced with revival is that we have not been able to get past the emotions of the revival to do the actual work of the revival. We get wrapped up in the emotions and then miss that there is work on the other side of that.
Yeah.
There is work that has to be done with breakthrough. When God brings us through something and brings us to a promised land in our life, there is still work that needs to be done, even when you get to that promised land.
Right.
We talk about in, this church that we're a part of, our beginning of the year, we've been talking about Possess the Land has been the name of
the series.
Of the series. And talking about going into that promised land. But what we can't miss is that, yes, the Israelites were coming out of the desert and coming into the promised land, but they still had to fight for their promise. And, in the promised land.
Right.
We miss, I think, where we've messed up in the past with revival meetings and why revival hasn't broken out the way that we would have hoped is because we've gotten into that promised land of breakthrough, that promised land of healing, that promised land of freedom, but continue to try and walk in the same way we did in the past.
Right. Yeah, it's this idea that the promised land is you are stepping into everything finished and ready, and it's all there. Like, the thing that's coming to my mind is that silly game that we've been playing, the like Royal Match or whatever. So it's like a match 3 type game, but it also like builds castles and lands and all this kind of stuff. Well, like when you're at a place where you're going to the next level, right? It opens up and expands into a land, but now you have to do the work to get the stars or coins or whatever to clear the land so that it's set and ready for whatever you're going to build on top of it, and then you continue moving forward, right? We are expecting, when we hear promised land, oftentimes we're expecting that we're going to walk in and there's the palace, there's the, set up for us already, that it's all going to be there. We don't have to work for it. It's just we're going to walk right into it. And really, when you enter into the promised land, it is the promised land, but there is still work to be done to build it and to make it what it is meant to be. It doesn't just exist that way.
Right. And I know we earlier talked about the fact that Jericho. We hear this great story about the walls of Jericho and the walls falling down as they walked around and marched.
Yeah.
Jericho was in the promised land. They were already in the promised land when they had to go and conquer the land. So even though we enter into our promised land, what God has for us, we still have to fight for that promise. We still have to continue to walk in faith. And even after they had the promised land, they still had to defend it. And how often do we get what we've asked God for, but we do not continue walking in the path that God has laid before us, and we end up either losing the promise or dirtying the promise. Because there were plenty of times where, like, the Israelites still were in the promised land, but were not free in the promised land. I mean, think about the time of Jesus. They're in the promised land, but they're being ruled by the Romans. So we need to be careful that we don't miss what God has for us in the promised land. And I think really what has troubled us when it comes to revival is that tomorrow has been robbed of today's victory because we refuse to deal with yesterday's wound and problems. Right? So we have this great breakthrough. We have, God gives us freedom, but then we try to go back and walk in that freedom like we're walking in the past.
Right, with the same patterns.
We need to relearn how to walk in freedom instead of captivity.
Right.
I mean, the Exodus is a great example of that, because God had to get Egypt out of the people before they could enter into the promised land.
Right.
For the purpose of, okay, if you don't relearn how to be my people, you're going to end up falling back. And recognizing that that's why so many times revivals have failed is because we've tried to walk in that freedom that comes from revival. We try to walk in that revived spirit, but in a brokenness pattern. And so this is where I really feel like if we're going to see revival, and not just in we had a great emotional experience for a few weeks, we need to pull ourselves up by the bootstrap, take up our cross, and do the hard work of change. Now, this isn't to say that God doesn't, on occasion, give people automatic, clear breakthrough, where they just all of a sudden have this freedom and can walk in complete new life. Because we see examples of that.
Sure.
But that is the exception, not the rule. In most cases, what's required is God says, okay, I've given you the freedom. I've broken the power of sin and death on your life. But now go and sin no more.
Right.
We miss the fact that he tells the woman to go and sin no more. He doesn't say, go, you're never going to sin again.
Right.
He gives her the mandate of, now it's on you.
Right.
I've given you the power. I've given you freedom. But now go and sin no more. And we miss the fact that we have a part to play in this. And I love that you said that we walk into that promise and we get that breakthrough and we expect that everything is going to be built and beautiful and wonderful. It's not heaven. We're still here on earth.
Right. Right.
And when we walk through the gates of heaven, okay, maybe then we can expect that everything is built. Streets are paved in gold.
Right. Right. Because he went to prepare a place for us.
Yeah.
But I think what you're getting at, and what I want to make sure that is understood and highlighted, is that God loves the process. And we talk about this all the time. Like, he'll give you the breakthrough to go through the process with him. He wants to develop relationship with you through taking you on the journey of process, through, relearning how to do things a different way than what you've done in the past, and walking through the emotions that you need to process from past hurt and all of that. He wants you to walk through that with him, because that's how you build intimate relationship with Jesus.
Yeah. I mean, that is that's a really good point. And we miss, I love that you use the word process, because we can't neglect the process. But we live in a society that says, I want it and I want it now. I should be able to dream it up and have it occur right now in front of me.
Right.
And that is not normal. And that's not the case. There is in the process changes us. It doesn't just get us what we want or what we need.
Right.
But it changes us as we go along.
Right.
And I think we forget that oftentimes it is the process that makes us who we need to be. Or it's the process that actually provides what we're looking for. Like we may have a dream or a vision, or we want something, and we just feel like God could give it to us. But really the path to getting that is the process itself.
Right.
And so that when God gives us the process, he's actually giving us what we're looking for. It's like your kid goes to the Lego store and sees, I want that Lego set.
Yeah.
We go and buy them the box with the picture on it with all the pieces inside and say, here it is. Here's what you've asked for. Here's what you want. But it's up to you to build it.
Yes. I was playing with Camden the other day, our nephew, and I was up in his playroom, and he had this box that was a Lego, built like a Lego monster truck. And I was like, oh, buddy, this is so cool. You have that. And he says that it's broken. And I'm like, it's not broken. We just have to build it, And he says it's too hard. Broken. Yeah. So, yes.
But it's the process of building it that provides what you actually need.
Yeah.
And so oftentimes when we ask God for something, he doesn't give it to us built. He'll give us a picture of it, which is why we're asking for it.
Right.
But then he gives us the ability and the product we need to make it happen.
Provision, yeah.
And I think we've been falling into this where we get frustrated, where we're like, God, we just want the end product.
Yeah.
And God's saying, well, I've given you the end product. You just have to do the work of putting it together. And for me, as someone who is not the most patient, now there are aspects of my life where I have grown to be patient. But I am not naturally the most patient. My mother will tell you that I was like the most impatient kid. And I want it, and I want it now.
Right, like most people.
And there's been times where I've had to learn where God's saying, I've given you what you're asking for. It just has more pieces and more steps than you realize. And we're in the middle of one of those building processes right now where we've asked God, okay, God, you've given us this, we've asked you for this, and we know that you're a good father, that you have called us to do this, that you've given us to do, but when's it gonna happen? There's been more steps in this process
than we were anticipating.
Like, I think honestly, in all of these steps, we thought we were
at the last one.
Yeah. And then there's been another step, another step, and another step.
Yep.
It's like, going back to the Lego reference, it's like you're building the Legos and you go through all the bags of all the Legos in there and you're like, okay, I've got them all done. But that doesn't quite look right. And then you turn around, look, and realize behind you there's another dozen bags, little bags of Legos that you now have to put together and put a part of this.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating because looking at the bags, you thought you were done. But it doesn't look right. And so realizing that, one, the steps that you still have to go through are for your good.
Yeah.
To create what you have envisioned in your mind. But it's also to give God glory and bring God glory, because really those extra steps are also going to add to the beauty of what you had envisioned.
Right.
And so with revival, we want that breakthrough, we want that promised land, but we don't want to do the work.
Right.
And so this is I guess I feel a cautionary statement that revival is coming. I mean, revival in many ways is here, but the success and the the width of the revival will depend on the people will depend on the church and how much they're willing to invest themselves personally, their sweat equity to make it happen. And I feel like with things going on in the world right now, the world's getting crazier and crazier, but there is a door that is open right now for the church to be influential.
Yeah.
For the church to bring revival, not just to the church, but to the communities that it operates in. But the church and the people of the church, not the organization of the church, but the people of the church.
The mechanism of the church. Yeah.
Need to put in the work.
Right.
Including us.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, we're not excluded from that. Pastors, leaders, evangelists are not excluded from it. In fact, we're the ones that need to be leading the way.
Well, yeah, you actively partner with that.
And in doing so, I think we will see what we've always envisioned. Like I remember being a kid praying, God, bring revival. God, bring revival. And it just seemed like that's something that you always said. You know, the pastors were always, you know, God, bring revival, our youth pastors. God, bring revival to our youth. Bring revival to our schools. It just seemed like that was the hip thing to pray. Because do we really see revival come to our schools? Maybe a little bit. Maybe from year to year, you'd see more people at the pole praying.
Yeah.
On the National Day of Prayer. But did we really see? And then once those youth got out of college or got out of high school, how many still continued following God?
Yeah.
Because I'm of the belief that if revival and a move of God is authentic, that you cannot be different after a move of God. When you have an authentic experience with the living God, you leave differently.
Oh, you cannot not be different.
Yes.
Yeah.
Cannot not be different.
Yes, double negative. Yeah, you leave changed. That's like for me, you know, I lived a life where I was constantly in and out trying to, you know, do things according to, you know, 1 foot in, 1 foot out with Christianity and my relationship with Christ. But when I recommitted my life to him, it was like, I will never go back to the way that things were. And there are times when things are very difficult and we're, you know, in a season where it's like, oh my gosh, can something just like break because this is so frustrating, that you think, I have no other option but to continue moving forward, because there's no way that I'm going back to the way things were, that there is a marked difference and a marked change. You cannot leave unchanged, right? That's what you're saying.
Yes. Yeah. But looking at, and that opens up another conversation.
I know we're going like all over the place. I know this isn't exactly what we're talking about, but what we were talking about beforehand. But I mean, I think it is probably setting up for this, because one of the things that we have talked a lot about is, I just lost my train of thought, that there was a word that the Lord gave to me years ago, of like, what does ripe for harvest look like? We always talk about the harvest is ripe and ready. Well, what does that actually look like? Because when you're just reading it from the Bible, it doesn't clearly say like, this is what you're gonna see. And I got this word from the Lord that a ripe harvest, what that looks like is despair. It looks like people who are in addiction, who are caught up in addiction, and people who are bound, who have, sexual sin and bondage, or just, it looks like probably to the person on the outside a mess, right? Yeah. That's a big mess. But that person is ripe for change, right? They are in a place where their heart, the soil of their heart, for the most part, not everybody is this way, but generally speaking, we only recognize we need a savior when we're in a situation where only a savior can save us, right? And so that's what harvest looks like. And I think that you could also say is the launch pad for revival. When you have an area that is dark like ours, where there's a lot of people bound by sin, and they're despairing and they're depressed and they're having anxiety and, drug addiction and all kinds of addiction and bondage, they're just waiting for somebody to show them a way out, right? And that when you offer that to them, it is this big, like, oh my gosh, I'm free. I've been set free. And we've heard a lot of stories like that through the revival meetings that we had of people that were completely bound being set free and their lives being changed. And that is kind of like the topic of what we're on right now, of like, how do you continue that? How do you move from the revival meeting and that initial like breakthrough, and you can honestly feel your chains and your bondage just fall to the floor and you're lifted. But then tomorrow comes, right? And the next day comes, and it's like, how do I walk in this? Because I don't even know how to walk in this. Even someone that's had a physical healing, they have lived in a way that they've had to adapt to the ailment or the disability or whatever. Now they don't have to adapt to it anymore. They get to live in this new way that they haven't been privileged to live in. How do I do that? And that oftentimes we'll shrink back, or what happens is people will shrink back because they don't want to have to work for it. It's hard. It is hard work. And we talked about that God is in the process, and he's all about the process and seeing us through, and the intimacy that we get in that. And there are times for, like us, for example, where we have been laboring for something for years, that I feel like for us, when we came into this revival meeting, that the Lord revived things within us, and he gave us a fresh drink, right? That he is bringing new wine out of us. And that there are times where I think revival meetings are for people who have been toiling, who have been laboring, and that God has something specific for them in that is going to break them into the next thing. Not that it's over, not that they step in and they walk into the promised land and everything's built for them, but that they're stepping into the new place where they're going to be able to labor again in a new way, but that the Lord has revived us. And so I think that it's important for us to not just understand, it's important for us to understand what revival is, what it looks like, why we want it, right? Like, why are we praying for it? And to understand what it brings. And then on the other side of it, to have the recognition of, now the work begins.
Yeah.
Now the good feelings, that moment of release that we have been needing has passed, and we're able to walk in something new. How do we do that? How do we walk in the new?
Yeah. And I think that is an important topic. And I think that's actually something that we need to dig into. And actually, I think as we're doing this, and I'm doing this on the fly, and this is probably you right now, I think that is something for the people that, as you're watching, to tune into part 2 of this discussion.
Yeah.
Where we'll get into what that looks like. Actually, I think that's more of what we plan on talking about.
Yeah.
And so we'll dig into that. Thank you for tuning in. Tune in for part 2 of this.
Yes, we set the stage for you.
Yes, we set the stage. So we thank you for watching, and be looking for part 2 of this. Give us your feedback. Give us what you think of this. And then give us what you think about part 2 as it comes out.
Yeah.
What do you agree with? What do you not? What should we expand upon in our maybe a part 3 discussion? But thank you for watching. I hope you like what you see, and I really hope you tune in for part 2.
Thank you. Bye.
God bless.